All right, so it is 7:02. We'll call the meeting to order. Everybody has the agenda. Anybody have any additions, removals, adjustments to that? Oh, okay. So we'll move forward. Any public comment? Okay. So we, at our last meeting, had discussed and changed dimensional standards for, or suggested the change to the dimensional standards for high density residential, to put that suggestion through to the select board. And as we were going through that, I noticed that the village residential has a little bit of discrepancy between principal and accessory structures, and the question was, do we want to adjust those as well so that there is no discrepancy between that? So if accessory structure is constructed, it would meet the same setbacks then as the principal structure, which was one of the concerns with ADUs being converted from accessory structures, which don't need to meet the same setbacks as principal structures. So that was where that came from. So does anybody have any?
And we discussed that that would apply to new accessory structures.
Yes.
It wouldn't apply to things that are already out there.
No, everything would have to, everything that's existing would then have to go through a waivers process.
Okay.
For permitting for that.
Okay.
So this is for new construction.
New construction is all it would apply to.
What is the setback that we currently have for an accessory unit?
So accessory units are currently 10 feet from the side and rear yard as opposed to 20 feet for the principal structure.
And an accessory dwelling is the same dimensions.
No. Wait. You mean the same setbacks?
Right.
I think we were trying to change that to match the principal setbacks, which is where the discrepancy between principal setbacks and accessory building setbacks causes a problem when you create an accessory building and then convert it to be a dwelling.
Correct.
Accessory dwelling.
Right. Be nice to have a common thing. And I'd be a little biased, I'm just trying to think of having it more lean towards the 20 feet for all rather than 10 and make it 20 feet for all. That's not a great deal of distance, and even in most village areas, talking about that particular zoning area in particular, the high density residential. From my experience, having lived in the village for 48 years, most properties would have the ability to do a 20-foot setback from a property or two properties, depending upon where they put the dwelling.
Right, yeah, so this is for the village residential zone as opposed to the high density residential zone that we're talking about right now.
Oh, I thought it was, oh, it's just for the residential?
Village residential,
Which is different.
not high density residential.
Oh, okay. Well,
So-
I'm fine with that for that.
Village residential, we believe we recently increased the density of, which encompasses the area outside of high density residential to include down Hewitt Road
Right,
and that area as well.
Right.
So,
Additional plan, right? Yeah,
I would have to take a look at the map. I don't have that up.
that's okay.
So.
I have a question.
Yes,
I have a question. So is this making it just for just if you're going to put an ADU,
no,
or
This is for any accessory structure.
Yeah,
Is
so
what
any
it is.
accessory structure.
Yeah, any new accessory structure would have to meet the same setbacks as a principal structure.
Okay, okay. Is-
Any leanings one way or the other on that, Melissa?
Well, I mean, what, I know this is kind of late in the game to ask about accessory structure, but is there a minimum size for that or a max? I mean, if somebody just wants to put up a shed, that's not considered
Yes.
an accessory.
Yes, a shed is an
Structure.
accessory structure. So we're dealing with setback for accessory structures, not setbacks
Right.
for ADUs, accessory dwelling units. Those are two separate things.
R-
Yes, the
Right, but it
ADU
would,
possibly go inside of the accessory structure. It's not completely dependent upon each other. And there are maximum sizes for accessory
Sure.
structures already in there as well.
Mm. Okay, but you did say it's just the residential, not the high, okay, not
The
the high
village
density.
residential,
Yeah.
village residential is the one that we are looking at now.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. Slim, you have any?
Still muted.
Is that working?
There we go.
Okay, great. I'm okay with it. I think people that in that village residential probably expect a little more spaciousness in their life than the high density residential. So yeah, this would give it to them.
Okay.
Okay.
Bill just joined us as well. Maybe stepped away.
He's been there.
Okay.
Fine with me too. Rob.
Okay. Thank you. Shannon?
I agree, that makes sense.
Okay. So if we want to change that, we would need a motion to do so, to make those match.
I'll make a motion that we make the setbacks for an accessory dwelling unit. And accessory
Structure.
just accessory structure. To match a 20-foot setback, to make it a 20-foot setback. Which is what we require now for a primary and accessory dwelling unit.
Primary structure.
So that they're all the same,
Okay.
something close to that, whoever's writing this thing.
But sort of clarify yes or no, that was a motion to make the accessory structure setback match the principal structure setback, which is 20 feet for side and rear yard in the village residential zone.
Yes.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Passes, all right. We will add that to our memo to the select board and let them know about that as well. So next is the capital improvement plan, which Valerie's been working on, and that got sent out. I think today that got out to everyone early this morning. I had no internet yesterday. I had maybe like a lot of others, so I wasn't able to do anything. But, anybody have any, or Valerie, do you want to step us through that or introduce anything or?
Yes, if you wouldn't mind, I'm not sure if I have a share screening capability. Oh, somebody does. That's not me, but that's okay.
Amazing stuff.
But cool. Well, and that's great. That's great because as I mentioned at the previous meeting, we've been working toward a capital improvement plan for quite some time, but there's been no real time pressure to do it, and it's complicated. There's a lot to it, but now that we are renewing our downtown designation application renewal, it requires a capital improvement plan, and the capital improvement plan process through the state statutes is pretty specific. So this is an opportunity, and well, it's a challenge and an opportunity at this point in time. So the document that has been shared with the Planning Commission is a work in progress. It's more than what we've had in the past, but it's still a pretty good document. The state statutes envision that the Planning Commission overall, statewide, would have more of a role in municipal capital planning, and so it provides for that. But in reality, it's a tall order for most planning commissions, most rural communities to actually accomplish, and most don't do it. So there are very few actual capital plans that are adopted through this process, because it is a process, especially now. And what it requires is a current year assessment of capital investments plus a 5-year projection, which is called the capital program. So the current year is the capital budget, the 5-year projection is the capital program, and the 6 years together are the capital plan. And the plan is intended to communicate to everybody, the community, the Planning Commission, the Select Board, what the priorities are for the community for capital improvements. And it's intended to be very closely tied to the town plan. And so in the draft that I have prepared, I'll be honest, stepping back a little bit, I have been focusing on the spreadsheets that you'll see later in the document. So I've been focusing on those all this time, because prior to my coming on board, there really hadn't been a consolidated view of all of these things. So I tried to put that together in a spreadsheet, and that's what's attached to this document. But the plan also includes a narrative and an outline of what the plan is intended to be. And it's intended to be very closely related to the town plan. So this is an opportunity for the Planning Commission to see how the current town plan relates to Bristol's capital needs, but also going forward. And I understand, while we might on many levels in our personal lives understand where things are going in the town for capital improvements, sidewalks, water lines, and this and that, septic and other things, roads, paving, but it's not in a document. It's not pulled together in a single document. And that's what this effort is intended to try to do, is to bring all of that together into a single document that lives beyond any one of us. I could get hit by a bus, whatever. But the document is intended to just evolve and continue to articulate the town's capital priorities. And there are a lot. The Planning Commission might not be fully aware of all of the capital projects that are going on, and that's completely understandable. The Planning Commission, as in general, especially before it became just not to diminish this, but not before it became just the Planning Commission, when it was still dealing with subdivisions and other kinds of site plan reviews and that kind of thing, before the Development Review Board took that off the Planning Commission's plate, which was a good thing, by the way, because it freed up the Planning Commission to be able to have the capacity at some point to kind of get a global picture of the town's global needs. And over time, and historically, planning commissions have had a hard time kind of getting a grip on the capital needs because lack of information. Yeah, there's anecdotal stuff, but planning commissions have generally lacked substantive information that they could actually get a grip on and somehow integrate that into a town plan vision or priorities. So this effort, it's very early. And the draft document is very much a draft, it's still in progress, and I feel a little bit embarrassed about it. I wish it was further along, but it's a project. But once it's done, boy, it'll be very useful to the Planning Commission and others, knowing what the full picture of what Bristol's capital priorities are. I mean, there's a lot going on. So hopefully this document, now, let me step back a little bit. I'm kind of rambling, but what I mentioned in my note, that what's precipitating this, even though I've been working on this for a while, is the downtown designation renewal, and the fact that the application requires either evidence of or an actual capital improvement plan adoption. And the downtown board is meeting. We have a draft application before the board, but the final review is in September. And so this timeline is a bit driven by that. And having this public hearing, or well, involving the Planning Commission at this point and having a select board public hearing on the 12th of August is integral to that process. I just want to say it's a work in progress. The document is very draft. So I understand that there's really not a lot of meat to respond to. So at this point, at this point it's conceptual. And you can see from the outline, you can see from the budget, the spreadsheets in the budget and some of the appendices, some of the content that is expected to be there. Talking about fire department, public works, sidewalks, roads, all kinds of things. And at some point, maybe not necessarily in this iteration, which is okay because this is our first go at it, but in the future, once this document is more fully developed, that it will be a valuable tool to the Planning Commission and others going forward to understand the broad spectrum of Bristol's capital needs and how all those things balance out. The ultimate goal is to try to maintain as level as possible a tax rate, which is of course a challenge because the municipal tax rate is a small fraction of the overall tax rate, which the other part of it we don't have any control over. And the municipality's priorities are public health and safety. So those are the things we have to focus on. The other things beyond that are wonderful. But we have to look at what is our capacity to do all the different things that need to be done. So AZ is scrolling through the general outline of the document and what it's intended to represent. It's going to cover a broad spectrum of different things. And there are probably things going on in town that the Planning Commission might not be fully aware of just because of all of our limited capacity to follow certain sources of news or information. And hopefully this document will bring a lot of that together into a single picture. My goal, if I can accomplish it, is include recommendations. The statutes don't require that, but I think it's useful as a way of identifying priorities. So I guess I've rambled, so I'll be interested if anybody has any questions at this point.
So I have one, Valerie. So is the intent, or I kind of thumbed through it a little bit, not can't get a whole bunch of chance to. But
Understood.
is the intent that basically the planning commission would be kind of advisory in terms of reviewing to make sure that potential growth projects and long-term improvement projections align with the town plan in terms of future growth areas and that sort of thing?
Absolutely. And that's an excellent question. And I'm glad you asked it because at this point in time, obviously, there's limited information for any of us to really respond to things intelligently. And so any comments the planning commission might have at this point for the select board would be constructive. One of the purposes or one of the benefits of this at this point in time is looking forward. Because the town plan, I think, was adopted in 2020, if I'm not mistaken. I might have the dates wrong, but the point is it's going to be coming up for amendment or renewal at some point in the near future, and it takes a long time to do that. You just don't do that. It's quite a process to update a town plan. And so hopefully the information in this document going forward will help inform the future town plans and inform the planning commission members and other people going forward beyond us what the full picture of what Bristol's capital needs are, and allow the town plan to be a document that articulates that. And one of the benefits of that is, well, the fact that the two documents would communicate with one another. And I will try to do this in this document as much as possible with the current town plan. But also that going forward, that each document, the town plan and the capital improvement plan, will help the town grant applications, other project resources that we can point to these capital plans and say, hey, look, we planned for this. These are real capital needs. Give us money, that kind of thing. That we're not just flashes in the pan. We are seriously planning for these important capital improvements. So those are two important benefits for going through this process, even though it's cumbersome at first, but once they're in place, once the documents are in place, hopefully it won't take much over time to just kind of bring them up to date, massage them, whatever that needs to be done to just, keep them alive.
Are there requirements for?
I don't know if I answered your question.
Oh, I think so. Are there requirements for yearly renewals, such as, I know the capital improvement plans I've seen have been focused on, say, water infrastructure, town's water system or something like that. Does it require annual updates and cost analysis input every year from that, or is it not quite that strict or involved of a process to update it?
That's a very good question also. The statute is not very clear about that. Presumably they are annually approved, but very few municipalities even have one, much less renew it on an annual basis. I can tell you that from experience, that it's a challenging process, and it really takes the commitment on the part of the town to do it. And I'll add that the statute it's structured so that it intends for the planning commission to be more actively engaged in this kind of thing, which is why it's integrated into the process. But the reality is that very few communities have that capacity to do that. And most planning commissions focus on the broader things of town plans, understandably. And so it's very rare for planning commissions to be able to have the capacity to dive into the specifics of capital improvements and really correlate that into updated town plans. This is an opportunity, though, for this planning commission to be perhaps begin to do that and perhaps begin to lay the framework for, I don't know, a broader planning process in that way, if you feel it's needed. Or maybe it turns out that whatever is laid out in this document is fine and we can just update it when it's needed. It's the statutes are very vague on that annual renewal kind of thing. It's not like a town plan that has to be renewed every number of years, or other documents that have to be renewed every number of years. I think that the statutes anticipate that it's renewed annually, but it's not that specific. Well, partly because the capital budget is adopted every year, but the capital program, which is the 5-year forward, that evolves. So it's the capital budget is adopted every year, ultimately through the town budget by the voters.
Anybody else have any questions or comments?
The question, go ahead, Bill, some does.
Actually, I have something.
Mhm.
Okay. You said at the beginning that something about the redesignation as a downtown, historical downtown. Is that this has to be done for that, or what? I'm just sorry. I know it was way back when you first started, but how does this relate to getting that designation, that redesignation?
Right. As part of the downtown designation renewal application, we need to demonstrate that Bristol has an adopted or is working toward an adopted capital improvement plan.
Okay, working toward. Okay, great.
That's
Yeah.
I'm banking on working toward, because
Yeah.
Yeah. The downtown board is meeting in September. We submitted our draft application in July. The staff folks are reviewing it and will be giving us some feedback through August, but the actual board meeting is in September. And so if we can demonstrate that we are making progress toward adopting a capital improvement plan, we believe that that'll make that'll make a big difference in our application. And especially if we've had the public hearing, we've gone through the process, even if the plan itself is not perfect. And at this stage, I wouldn't expect it to be, because this is I expect this to be a living document. And I hope it will be a document beyond us as we continue
priorities
to work
change
with it. And information. And as I mentioned in my notes earlier in my transmission thing, that we don't have all the information yet. We're still. This is quite a project to pull it all together, and we might not have all the narrative in the physical document, but we know it in our minds, or we know it in our community experience. So it's kind of in there anyway. And so this document is an effort to kind of capture what we know at this point in time as best as we can, and approve it as best as we can, but knowing that it's going to be updated. It's going to evolve over time. So if it's not perfect this time around, we know that. But it's better
it's
than
just showing the process is ongoing.
Yeah, and it's better than what we've had, which has been not much. So,
thanks.
So yeah, hopefully this will be a useful tool going forward for the select board, the planning commission, for everybody.
Slim? You're muted.
Seem to be there it goes. Yeah, sorry. Hi, Valerie. Tell me if I'm wrong. I thought I heard you say that the capital improvement plan was going to inform the town plan, but it would seem to me that it would work if the town plan would be the document that would really inform the long-term capital plans. Have I got this back? Yes, no, what?
You're absolutely right, Slim. And what I did in this document was capture the essence from the current town plan to show how it relates to what's in this draft. But what we might find is that the current town plan might not fully, and the planning commission of the past might not have fully had the full picture of what the town's capital needs are. So this is an opportunity for the planning commission and the community to take a broader look and understand what the broader look is for the town's capital needs. And I'm going to use one example, and this is going to be controversial, but this is a good point to bring it up. The town plan really can drive a lot of what's in the capital improvement plan, and the state statutes anticipate that it would. But in Bristol's case, I'm going to give you an example. And again, this is going to be a little bit controversial, but it's relevant. And it's in the project descriptions. When I go through the different departments and public works, there's a little section in there for gravel pit. Well, the fact is, the municipal gravel pit is going to run out in the next two or 3 years. And what next? So that is a capital issue that the town should be aware of. And from the planning commission's perspective, for all kinds of reasons, the planning commission should want to know about that. But would you have known about that if you didn't see this in this kind of document? Or other things that might be hot button things that you would not have otherwise been aware of if it wasn't laid out in this document, because you have so many other things going on. So my point with the gravel pit is it literally is going to be running out in 2 or 3 years. And what's our plan? We don't have one, because right now Bristol is pretty restrictive, quite restrictive on any future gravel operations, yet it sits on miles of gravel. So that's an issue. I'm not making judgment or anything else, but it's just a point of fact that is something that the planning commission will want to think about. And maybe I understand that it was a sensitive topic before my time. I wasn't there. But I don't know how things might have changed since then, and values or priorities or other things. So that's an example of the kind of thing that the planning commission can have real influence on how that particular item goes forward. Other items that are that will be in this document that are quite not quite laid out yet, but you've probably heard about, is the fact that the public works facility on Pine Street has got to go. The department has to either rebuild that facility or move. And we have found that trying to improve the facility in that location is hyper complicated for lots of reasons: environmental issues, landfill issues, all kinds of things. And so the town the select board purchased with voter approval a 4.7 acre parcel off of Route 116 and Hewitt Road to plan for a new public works facility. Was the planning commission involved in that decision? I don't think so. But it's a major capital initiative that is going to make a huge difference in future iterations of the town plan and how that operation relates to other functions in the town. So that's an example of how this kind of capital plan and capital planning process relates to what the planning commission is doing. As I mentioned, that the state statute envisions the planning commission being more involved in the capital planning process. And for most communities, that's not really a practical thing to do. Very few communities have that capacity. In some communities like Burlington, where I used to work, the town plan was really integral into departmental requests for capital things. So they were in that venue or that realm, they had the capacity to very vigorously tie the town plan to capital projects, but that was also a very coordinated effort to make sure that the planning commission was closely involved in those conversations. So it's an opportunity and a challenge, and what other verb we want to use or adjective in this case, to bring the planning commission into perhaps any feedback on this particular iteration of the plan would be great, but knowing that the planning commission has an opportunity to really weigh in to the future iterations of this document in a real significant way. Yeah, I think that's an opportunity, but it's also a challenge because it's capacity, and I totally get that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else?
Anyone else dare?
I have a question, I guess, really is, I understand what the state's desire is that you've explained, to get planning commissions more involved. And what are you suggesting the steps would be for the planning commission to consider? What is makes the most sense, so we can decide as a unit whether this is a good thing for us to do or whether we have no appetite for it, or whatever the case might be. I think in most of these issues, the select board still has, either the select board or the community, if there's money involved, still have the final say, correct? And most of these types of things, when there's certainly money involved, and with any planning, often there's money involved. Is that true?
Totally. And if you can see from the spreadsheet tables that are attached to that document, the select board and the voters make decisions every year about how much money to allocate to various capital reserve funds, for example.
Sure.
And those are based upon certain goals,
Right.
certain plans. We have the capital plans for the fire department equipment, the police department equipment, public works equipment, and sidewalks. The sidewalks reserve fund, we have various reserve funds set up.
Right.
And we put money aside almost every year for most of them with plans to do certain things. And so this plan, the capital plan, would help articulate some of those priorities. Of course, as I mentioned in the narrative, that it's a planning tool. It's not a commitment. It's not a contract. Only until the voters approve a particular budget in a particular year, such as this year, which is FY25, only do those things become kind of committed. And even then, the state does not regulate budgets on a line by line basis. It's more like the end of the year fund balance. Are you deficit or not at the end of the year with the total thing? So it's not a line by line kind of thing. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but
my question is, we're here today talking about something that you're working on, that our various departments, whether it's fire or the water department, whatever, already have capital project plans in place, which they might hope they might be met and whatever, that I'm sure evolve. Are you looking for us to pull it all together? Are you thinking that are we more of a design team and get the information from the various parties? Or what role exactly do you or does the state envision a planning commission to do versus the people in the highway department that know their equipment and
Right.
know the vehicles and know what might be needed and know how long the grader might last, et cetera. And we get the information from that, just like you do.
That's an excellent question. My answer to that would be it relates to the town plan update process. And at this point, I don't expect the planning commission to really have a lot to weigh in on this particular draft, unless you have specific things that you want to mention, like, oh, you should be putting more attention to this, or you put more attention to that. But in the future, when it comes through the town plan update process, I think that is when the real opportunity comes along to reach out through that process, the town plan process, infrastructure process, the whole broad picture process of what the town needs. There's all kinds of needs. And so I think that would be the opportune time to really focus on how to apply this information, how to improve this information, how to adapt this information to articulate the community's priorities. I mean, which not just infrastructure, but so many other things, natural resources and housing and so many other things. But that's what the town plan does. And I know that there's this tension between how prescriptive or how specific a town plan should be versus being a visionary document. And that's an ongoing thing. But it's a challenge. It's an opportunity for Bristol to, at some point in the future, to have the town plan be what you want it to be. And I say that because, as I mentioned, it's coming up for renewal kind of soon. So it takes a long time to do. So you can't. Anytime you have the capacity to get started on it, the better, because it's going to take longer than you think. It always does. And there are so many layers to a town plan amendment and all the things. And this is just one of them. But hopefully this particular document, once it's more fully formed, will be helpful. And that's the goal, is as a planning tool, not a pressure, not an obligation, but as a planning tool. And that's the goal. I hope I answered the question.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay. All right.
So as again, for the select board's purposes, we're going to have a public hearing on August 12th on a document not much better than this one. I mean, hopefully I'll have more narrative put together on it, but it'll still be pretty draft. And the point for our purposes for the downtown designation application is to show that we're doing it. We're making the effort to adopt this document. The document itself is actually pretty good. I think the table of the expenses, they reflect, as far as I know, unless there's any input that says, what's going on here? What were you thinking when you put this number here and these numbers don't add up or whatever? I'm totally open to any of that kind of stuff. But hopefully, at the very least, the budget numbers in the spreadsheets that show the current year and the 5-year plan, those are the guts of the capital plan. And then the narrative just kind of fills out the flesh. So hopefully we'll have more of that figured out before the select board's hearing on the 12th. And then we'll have a final public hearing on August 22nd. So there's going to be a lot of opportunity and that's the purpose of a public hearing. It's not to say this is the final thing and what do you think of it, but it's here we are, give us your feedback. And that's how I view a public hearing. And so that's what we'll have on the 12th, and then another on the 22nd of August, and we'll see what we have at the end of that process to hopefully have something that the select board can feel comfortable approving.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So unless anybody has anything else, we'll close that and move on to the next item.
I just want to close by saying if the planning commission shouldn't feel obligated to comment on this, this is an opportunity for the planning commission to comment on it before the select board's August 12th hearing. You may or may not choose to, that's okay. But there'll also be another opportunity for the 22nd if you have other comments. So I just don't want you to feel pressured. I realize you just got this today or yesterday and you're just seeing it very briefly now. So take time if you need to, and there'll be other opportunities.
You said the second meeting was on the 22nd
That's the plan.
of August, which is a
Correct.
Thursday. Okay. Our next meeting is not until the 20th, and that's why I was asking. So just timeline wise and that's it. Thank you, Valerie.
Thank you.
All right, so our next item is recommendations for planning and zoning administrator position for the select board. So this is one as things have developed and positions changed and there have been comments in the past about interactions and structure of that position and all the other entities around it. So this is kind of what we see as an opportunity to better define or try to lay out some of that stuff. So that's where this item is. Does anybody have anything they'd like to open up with on that? Okay. I know there's been talk of whether it be reports, what those may entail or how often, that kind of stuff. I don't know if anybody else has any. Slim, have you had any thoughts about any of that?
You're talking about reports from the zoning administrator to ourselves as a planning commission.
Yeah,
Well, didn't Chris seem to give us one each meeting, generally speaking, if something was going on, if I remember correctly? Um,
I haven't heard a report from him since I've been on the planning commission.
well, when he was there, he would come in and say a little something. It wasn't every time. Is that, am I just making this up or?
I'm just going by my own experience and what the.
it wasn't necessarily every week that we got, every meeting that we got an update, I don't think, unless there was a lot going on, it kind of seemed like, so.
Well,
I can give you an update right now.
yeah, I think updates are good from the planning.
Yeah.
Commission. I'll go that far.
Okay. I know for me, one of the things that I think might be helpful in terms of if there's reports and tracking of things, it's things like what limitations are we seeing, or what are the trends in terms of the kinds of permits that are coming through, which may impact the town plan or the zoning regs in terms of we have a big deficiency in this area or in this zone. Something that's one of the things that would help inform us to realign that.
Sounds right.
I can tell you right now, there's a lot of people wanting to do ADUs. I had 3 people in one day who gave me applications. That they either want to convert garages or attic space or they just want to convert something, or they want to like build a mother-in-law suite or ADU, and that's definitely been a big trend. Which I know you guys are doing new regs.
Oh yeah,
too,
no,
so-
that's great, that's kind of stuff that I was thinking of that would be helpful.
For sure.
Bill, have you had any thoughts on that?
Thanks, Rob. I think a brief update every meeting would be helpful. The kind of permits that have been sought and the number, maybe with an opportunity for some follow-up questions. That's how I'd feel.
I could do.
Melissa?
Yeah, there a place where we can go and just look at the permits that have been granted or what's been applied for? Or we would just rely on the report? I mean, it's public information, so I don't know.
It is public information. I am not sure. The question is it posted somewhere, or would you need to come into the town into the
Yeah.
office to obtain that information?
They're all permits that get like building permits, that I approve, and this is what Chris, kind of was doing before me. There's a physical printed copy of the permit with like a drawing on the back of what it looks like posted in the lobby. I can also, it's shared between the entire office on the Dominion cloud share. I'm sure there's a way I can make it so that other people can have access to it.
And so are those only posted in the window of that posting time period, or are those out there available for 90 days or a year?
For a year.
Yeah.
Chris has the ones from 2023 out there. And then every permit that is processed, a copy gets put into the vault. Building permit, certificate of compliance, all that is public record in the vault. And every permit that I do gets scanned into my folders. So there's records of everything. It's just the best way to make it accessible for everyone.
So it's not necessarily online or anything like that at this point.
No, it's like in the office cloud share.
So are those building permits and certificates of completion and compliance, sorry, whichever it is, are those recorded in the books like deeds, or are those recorded separately in the vault?
Well, they're recorded as copies put into a folder, as Chris told me of. This is where they're kept until the end of the year, where they're put into a report. And it's right now I have a growing stack of all my building permits that have been approved.
Okay.
What kind of report is it put into?
I believe it's a finalized report. I'm not 100% sure yet. I'm still
Have you seen one?
a zoning report, like for the full year. Not yet.
If I could add that I have seen printouts of reports that were very informative, of a year-long reports that are available. I don't know if one's been produced recently, but they are available to be produced. And one option is to be able to produce maybe a monthly report or every other week or every weekly report to Front Porch Forum of applications and approvals of things like that. And it should be fairly, if a system can be put in place that makes it efficient, that could be easy to do. One thing I wanted to mention while I have your attention is something that the Planning Commission might not be fully aware of is the number of water connection applications we are getting and the subdivision applications we are getting for developments outside or near to the water district area, but are kind of in effect expanding the water district, but creating a lot of new infrastructure demands on the water system. And that's something that related to the capital plan, the Planning Commission at some point would probably want to be paying attention to, because the water system has a limited capacity. And right now, leaks are consuming some of that capacity that could be and should be allocated or available to new development, which helps, the tax base and the community and all those things. But so that there's a lot of demand. My point there is there's a lot of demand right now on the water system because of new developments, new subdivisions that the planning commission might not be in the loop about. And I'm not sure through this zoning permit reporting process would be a way, a mechanism to help keep the planning commission informed on that.
So is this activity all within the water district, or is it creeping outside the water district with the interest and applications?
Well, at the moment, it seems to be within the water district. And the reason I say that is mostly it's been within because it's been on North Street and off of Pine Street. But there's a recent one off of Plank Road that appears to be within the water district, but it's on the margin. Plank Road is kind of outside the traditional village area, and this is useful for the planning commission to be aware of because it's growing in that direction. And this might already be part of the ADU and the housing amendments that you've been working on, and I'm just not paying attention, or it's not connecting in my mind right now about that. And so maybe those things are completely aligned right now with what's proposed in the amendments to the regulations. But there's activity going off of Plank Road for the water system, and it's consuming a fair amount of the select board / water commission's time to deal with water extensions outside of a public right of way. So it'll at some point it'll be worthwhile for the planning commission to look at this, especially that area, if you haven't already. And I don't know that you have or have not. But that's an example of the kind of things we're talking about, the reporting of permits so that you're aware, and then also this whole concept of capital planning. So they pretty much go together.
One of the items with this that Kevin had brought up and included in his chair notes was his opinion, that I know he's heard before other places as well, about kind of a review process for issued permits, and before it gets final issuance is reviewed or double checked, if you will, by somebody besides the zoning administrator. Who that would be is unclear, because that could be potentially burdensome, but shouldn't be. That's not the intent of that. Just as a double check so that there's less potential for something to accidentally slip through the cracks or whatever else.
I fully agree with that.
Yeah.
I actually just emailed Kevin today because there was a permit that came in that I could make a judgment call on, but also there's it was a building permit for a conditional use permit, and that kind of gray area that comes up in zoning, despite how black and white you try to make zoning, does require someone else's perspective and eyes, just to make sure nothing slips through the cracks, or uses that have limitations and structure on them get bent. So I'm very down for that.
Well, one of the things to what Melissa was talking about before, we have Izzy, you're part-time.
Mhm.
And if we're having more demands, because there is a desire to have more accessory dwelling units and development, especially within the core area, for lack of a better word. Even with a community of 4,000 people, like we have in a village of whatever it is, 2,100 or so, is one person adequate to do the job? I know one thing that's crossed my mind from practical experience is that I don't know, once a permit's issued, whether there's ever a follow-up, that what the applicant applied for is exactly what happens.
There is a process for that.
What's the process?
The process is once they're finished, what they're supposed to do is, when you get a permit, you have 2 years of building time. But for a new construction, say a house, you build the house and then you have to get a certificate of compliance, which used to be a certificate of occupancy, but that was combined with the certificate of compliance. And that requires that the zoning administrator goes out, looks at the house, looks at the new construction, the building, whatever is has been built and permitted for. And basically says, this is what was permitted, this is what is here now. You have this many bedrooms, you have the septic, you can occupy this space. And that is done after the building.
So what about a building that's, what would be best way to put it? Where someone just moves ahead in doing something because a permit was issued for the building, but they're changing the use or they're adding something within it. Does anything have to be done then?
Like if it wasn't for just a residential building.
Or whatever it's being used for? It was a garage and then someone wants to make it a auto body shop.
I mean, that's hard.
Yeah, I know,
Yeah.
it is, and I can think of situations where, you know, what's the expression where you say, you get it done and you apologize later type of a thing?
Yeah.
Here to ask for
Yeah,
forgiveness and permission.
and I know that happens.
Yeah, there's,
One way that can be limited is if there's intentionally a follow-up, especially on projects that have been okayed in a fairly recent period of time, whatever that would be determined. And a check is made. And then you can learn whether the things have been done properly or whether someone's trying to bend the rules to
Yeah.
achieve something.
I agree. I think the certificate of compliance is like a solid first step. But that it does put a lot of the. It is the applicant's responsibility that once they're finished with building, that they submit the certificate of compliance. So. And I guess the other backtrack we have for that is when people are selling their lands, we do a compliance check again to make sure that there's no zoning violations. So having a third step of like a check-in, I agree with, could be put in.
It's just a thought.
Again, I've only been here like 2 months. So I'm trying my best to catch up. There's quite a few years of zoning and projects, and I understand that some things have slipped through the cracks. And I think moving forward, efforts should be made to prevent that from happening again.
Shannon, did you have?
No,
No.
eventually everybody asked all the questions I was gonna ask, so I just
Okay.
had to sit here and listen. But thank you.
Perfect. I just wanted to make sure everybody had their opportunity.
If I could add one more thing.
Go ahead, Donna.
We renamed or kind of rearranged the title of the position as zoning and planning administrator to acknowledge that in the current times, over the last umpteen years, the emphasis has been on the zoning side of things. But recognize that at some point, the planning commission in the town may evolve to have a person as a zoning and planning administrator who can spend more time, more focused time, more actual time with the planning commission on a lot of planning kind of things, such as what I was talking about with the capital plan, which is one example, is where obviously for the planning commission, because right now I have to say it's completely residing with me. And that's not sustainable because the next person after me might not have the wherewithal to do that. My background is I'm a former planner. And as AZ noted, I recycled some of this material from my prior planning experiences to bring this to this point and for Bristol. But another town administrator in the future might not have that ability or wherewithal or capacity or whatever. At this point in time, I happen to do that and have that. So perhaps where I'm going with this is that once this thing is out there, and the planning commission might perhaps be more, especially when you begin getting involved in the town plan update, you might find more need for more of the planning side of the zoning and planning administrator. So the title allows for that. But we recognize that at this point in time, the focus is on the zoning side of things. And that's why it's part-time. But my point is, it has the capacity to grow to beyond the zoning part, but the title allows for the planning side. So I want you to keep that in mind, that the town has the capacity to add that planning, more of the planning side for what the planning commission may need to do some of these things.
Okay. Not knowing how the trend works and budgeting and everything else, I'm sure it's a spike and probably not a new plateau, but it almost seems as though the demand is almost there for full-time rather than part-time in that position, with all of the added things that could be encompassed under that in terms of the capital improvement plan and town plan updates and everything else that could kind of all fall under that umbrella.
It has that potential. We're not there yet, but it has the potential.
I personally think that with a part-time position, especially because of frequency and availability and everything else, I think that personally a double check, a sign off of some sort is a good idea as well, whether that be, I don't think the planning commission may necessarily be the appropriate person or instrument for that. It may be more DRB related to as a double check, even of just should this be reviewed or should it not be, or yes, it meets the basic criteria of administrative. Even at that level, I think it's somewhat appropriate, while not wanting to just pile on duties and responsibilities to others. I don't even know how we would go about instituting that.
Well, that's an interesting challenge. I don't believe it would be appropriate for any member of the DRB to be involved, because that would be kind of an ex parte situation if any application ended up before them. But internally, Chris is a deputy zoning administrator, so he could be available. And given my background, I can also be available, at least now. But again, in the future down the road, if any future town administrator might not be in the same position, but for the time being, I can be a resource in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I still go to Chris with questions. There's like a lot of permits that, not a lot, but there's still ones that like stump my head on, just like sometimes they're in two different districts, and that's like, how do you decide when a parcel is divided in half or divided 80-20, like those kind of gray areas are where I definitely recognize that a double check is necessary, because you need a little bit more than one person who's making decisions for the whole town.
Mm-hmm.
I'm stronger than I look.
One
Is
thing
it-
I've also suggested to the Regional Planning Commission is a circuit rider administrator for all the Addison County towns, because so many Addison County towns are struggling with capacity issues in this way. And so if they had one or more circuit rider staff people that could help out with specific questions in this way, or support, Anyway, it's just a question I have out there for them. I think would be a nice idea.
I know there's kind of like an interim deputy zoning administrator, if that was to be the vehicle through which all this, we instituted this or suggested it, is that a position that would need to be changed, or could that be basically a rider, a title to another position in terms of
Well,
somebody?
Chris is now the deputy zoning administrator.
But is
Yeah.
that long term? Is that a permanent, or is that just
As long as he's sitting upright in there.
Okay. I didn't know if that was an officially created or just as an acting.
Yeah, it is. It was an appointment, an official
Okay.
appointment. Yeah.
Okay. Anybody have anything else on this topic? Does anybody have any thoughts on recommendations that should be made to select board on this topic?
Well, I think we mentioned a bunch of things, and it would probably be good if we condensed that into what we think might be a good report that AZ or whomever comes in the future might make to the planning commission, so that it's not burdensome and it takes so much time, but it keeps us informed in terms of what's going on. You know, I didn't know until I asked Chris last week, or at least it's been a long time, you know, how many applications do we get even in a year? I wouldn't have guessed the number that we did. And where are the pressures? You know, and smaller families with homes, and some of them are bigger, it's only natural that people are looking to do things with those properties, et cetera, et cetera. But that's all good to know for the planning commission, in terms of, moving forward, so. But how that's created. Maybe I can give some thought to it, and you all can, and we can come up with a short list that we can present to the select board. That would be something for any zoning administrator that knows that they've got to present to us once every so often. Doesn't have to be.
Just, you asked earlier if I had seen a permit report. I haven't seen a finalized annual report, but I have created minor reports of permits using NEMREC. And the report, you can essentially create reports, and I did it when I was preparing for the FEMA flood assessment, to be able to see what permits were processed for the flood area. And that shows you what was built, what type of permit was it granted. You can choose the information it gives you, and I can easily create one of those for each monthly meeting.
I imagine there's got to be a process for the permitting, so that legally the town has documentation and it's in a place that we can know where it is. Should in the future there something that might come up, not even between us and a resident, or between two residents, about, well, that was never issued, or and a way to make sure that we have the information that would verify what was done. And if there was a problem, or if they needed to go to the design review board, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe there is something like that. I don't know of it. I think it's not something we've ever talked about. I don't know whether the select board has that information, or Melissa has that information in terms of what's the proper process for dealing with this stuff. Because there's only going to be more applications as we move forward. And it's a real hornet's nest. Only takes one lawsuit for it to be a pain in the ass, big time, and costly.
So guess if we don't have any motions at this point, because this was an action item, we should table this until next meeting.
Yeah, I'll try to write something up. I mean, not in a very terribly descriptive, but a suggestion as to what we might consider. The zoning administrator report to us on some kind of a timely basis.
Okay.
And it not being terribly burdensome.
I have some notes on that too.
Hmm?
If you want to compare, I've been making notes on that too, things I'd like to see, like the
Sure.
number applied for the type, the zone they were in, what municipal connections do they require? And whether or not they're ever completed. Because you really know that 2 years, you really need 2 years, because, you know, I've never applied for a thing, never done anything.
Yeah.
So I get it.
Okay. So with that, we'll close item 3C. Move on to administrative matters. So item A is actually. Item A is approval of minutes, and I do not believe minutes went out or were created. I did not catch that earlier. So that will need to be carried over till next meeting, till those minutes are generated, so. Next up is update from Hazard Mitigation Plan Steering Committee.
I mean, it wasn't, Valerie, you were there, weren't you? There was like 4 people on that meeting, last meeting we had. I don't know if you were one of the ones that were there with the hazard mitigation, but, I don't know that we really covered much of anything. We might have pointed out a couple of things. We talked about, obviously the flood mitigation and the dams, and the fact that there really aren't any dams in Bristol, that are technically in the Bristol area, other than the one that technically is owned by, was part of the Gems Waterworks. So we talked about that. I'm trying to find the meeting notes here, because I do have notes on this.
Yeah, I always wondered about that dam, how long that'll last. I heard from Dan. I go walking out there quite a bit.
Oh, yeah.
I do. You know, every once in a while I think about it. It'll last forever.
I think I guess we discussed that. We said there really wasn't a whole lot of worrying about where the water was gonna go, except maybe.
Yeah, maybe that one home downhill at the Four Corners, which is a quarter of a mile away or more. All the water's gonna go there. You're right, though.
What else did we talk about? We talked about, send out notifications, which Valerie's on. To obviously the community stakeholders, churches, letting people know about the CARES program, that they can sign up if they want to be contacted during an emergency. Things we hadn't talked about before, maybe was, Meals on Wheels, reaching out, and food shelves. We talked about St. Ambrose and the Bristol Have a Heart Community food shelves as part of the team of people who when something bad happened. Is there anything else that you can think of that we really covered, Valerie? In that meeting? I mean, it was pretty quiet. There were like 4 of us there, so mostly Steph did the talking.
Mhm.
And we did the listening and a few here and there. I don't know, there's gonna be a lot of changes.
Okay.
So maybe hazard ranking, hazard history, new hazards, but I don't see there won't be a lot of change in this one. In my opinion.
All right,
And the next one meeting is tomorrow morning, so that's really not helpful.
that's all right.
Always the day after,
That's right.
so I have to remember stuff for 30 days.
I'll have to admit that the rain is coming down really loudly over here, and I don't have headphones on, so I really can't hear what's going on through your meeting. But the committee, the Hazard Mitigation Plan Committee, is meeting tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, and maybe Shannon already mentioned that, but we have more going on tomorrow.
Perfect, thank you.
Because I can't hear what's going on, I'm going to sign off. So thank you
Val.
for everything. Thank you for all your work. I really appreciate it.
No,
Hi, Valerie.
Bye, Valerie.
Thank you.
So that brings us to the next item, which was miscellaneous correspondence. So with the agenda that had been sent out, there was some correspondence about the Moncton Town Plan revisions and their update that they're working through. And then I think the only other item included would be the open law meeting changes, which just went into effect at the beginning of the month. And I don't think there's a whole lot in that we need to worry about with our procedure. Generally covers what those new laws require, so. My quick look at that, so. Everything's warned and has a remote option available. Kind of by default as we've been doing it, so. We're covered. Any public comment at this time? All right, I think that brings us the rest of the way through the agenda. Is any motions?
So move to adjourn.
Second,
Second.
okay. All those in favor?
Right.
Aye.
Oh, wait.
Aye.